Good morning. For those of you who are still out in the foyer, we're going to ask you to come into the auditorium so that we can get started. As we've had in the bulletin the last few weeks, this morning during a combined Sunday school, we have Josh and Beth Paulicks with us. They are missionaries with ABWE. Josh is a surgeon at Hope Hospital in Togo, Africa. And for those of you who have been part of our church for years, you know that we've had a long-time presence in Togo, especially with Phil and Kitty McMillan. And so with ABWE and Togo, they're a very good match for our church family. And I was just sharing with them, look back in my calendar, I don't know how many of you remember, but they actually shared their ministry with us back in November of 2017. And at that particular time, we weren't able to support them, but things have changed since then. We've reconnected with them, especially through Aaron Davis. Aaron and Josh went to Cedarville together. And so we are excited to have them with us this morning. So let me open us in prayer, and then we will begin. Father, thank you for Josh and Beth, and I pray that you will give them great freedom and liberty as they share their ministry with us this morning. As a church family, help us to be attentive and good listeners. And Lord, give us great wisdom as we consider partnering with them financially. So this is an important time for our church family. We ask that you will guide and direct in everything we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, church, and thank you to the Missions Committee. We really appreciate the opportunity to come here and share with you about what God is doing in our lives and what God is doing in Togo. A little bit, since it's been like 6 years, and most of you don't know us, if I heard a church presentation about a missionary 6 years ago and then never talked to them again, I wouldn't remember anything about them. So we'll just kind of share a little bit of our story and our testimony. I grew up in a non-Christian home and actually started riding a bus to church when I was in second grade. Then grew up in kind of a bad neighborhood and bad school system. And in junior high, my mom was able to work it so that I could go to a private Christian school. Through the ministry at the church that I was going to, riding a bus, I made a profession of faith in Jesus and was baptized. And then as I was growing up through high school, I just felt like God was calling me to do medical missions. And I didn't know where or what that was going to look like. So I went on to Cedarville and then to University of Cincinnati for medical school, and then went back to Dayton, Ohio for my general surgery training. And during my first year of general surgery training, I met this lovely lady, and I'll let her share about her story and kind of our story together.
So I did grow up in a Christian home. My dad was a family practice doctor, and then when I was about 7, felt like he was called into the ministry, and so we moved up to Grand Rapids for him to go to Grand Rapids Seminary, Baptist Seminary, and then we moved to near Battle Creek for him to take his first job as the pastor. So I grew up in the church, hearing about God. I got saved when I was 4 years old during family devotions, and I just knew at that point that I was a sinner and that I really wanted Christ as my Savior. But it really didn't become real to me until I was in high school. At Lake Ann Camp near Traverse City is when I really decided that I wanted to follow Jesus with my life. And so I went to Cedarville University to get a nursing degree. And during that time, growing up, I was always told, you're going to be a pastor's wife or a missionary. And it's like, no, definitely not going to do that. And so I graduated from Cedarville and worked at Dayton Children's Hospital on the cancer unit. And I loved my job. I loved the ministry I could have with the families, and that was kind of what I always saw as what God wanted me to do. But about a year into that, I started feeling kind of unsettled and just felt like God wanted something different for me. And it was actually during our church's missions conference that I really knew that God was calling me into missions. I called my parents on the way home from church that night and said, I know God's calling me to be a missionary. I just don't know what that looks like right now. So could you pray with me that God would show what he wants for me? And I realize now that God has such a sense of humor because earlier that day, I had gone to Sunday school and then gone into the church service, and there were a group of people sitting in the front, and they told my best friend and I to come and sit with them. And so I sat down next to this guy I hadn't met, and he introduced himself and then said, I'm sorry if I smell bad. I don't remember the last time I took a shower. Yeah. He was not somebody on my radar at that point. But about a month later...
Not a recommended pickup line.
So about a month later, we were actually at the commissioning for one of our pastors, who was also a Bible professor at Cedarville, who was retiring to go into missions, to be a full-time missionary in South Africa. And we started talking about missions, and it was really at that we realized that we both really wanted to do missions. And so the first time we went to Togo, so we got married. And then the first time we went to Togo, we had been married for 4 months. And it was really during our time there that God made it evident that he wanted us to go back. It looked a little bit different for both of us, but for me, we went up to Mongo for a long weekend, and we were doing a clinic. The hospital wasn't built. They were just starting the construction around the hospital. And so we were doing a clinic to see which patients needed to go down to the Southern Hospital to be seen. And there was this woman who had come in who had some complications from a C-section that she had had. And she was telling us this story through a translator about how she went to the government hospital, and she had been in labor for already a couple of days. She went to the government hospital, and there at the hospital, the government hospital, if you don't have money, you don't get seen. And so she left to go and get the money she needed and came back and had the C-section she needed. But by that point, the baby had already died. And it just really broke my heart. And I really thought, if we had been here, if the hospital had been here, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And then that was kind of fresh on my mind. And I'll let Josh kind of share this story, but we went by a cemetery after that, and it was really there that we realized that these people, these Togolese, were not only physically dying, because some of these grave sites were only about this big, but these people were also spiritually dying, not knowing who Jesus was and what he could do for them.
Yeah, so as we were, Beth mentioned that we both kind of felt the call to go to Mongo and felt it kind of in different ways. As we were there in Mongo, God kept bringing the passage to my mind of where Jesus asks, "Who do men say that I am?" And then, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter responds, that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, and And then Jesus tells them, "It is upon this rock that I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it." And so this was so just a little bit about Mongo. We were there in April. It's really hot in April. That's a hot season. We're talking 120s as far as the highs. The lows at night are in the 90s. So it's hot and uncomfortable, and so I had in my mind, oh man, this has got to be the closest to the closest to what it's like. Theologically, I know this is not anything right. But in my mind, figuratively, it was like, man, this has got to be like one of the closest places to hell that there could be on earth. But really, as Beth mentioned, for those people that were dying there, we went by that graveyard and saw this, and it was the gates of hell. Because many of them had never heard a gospel presentation. This was a strongly Muslim area, and also kind of a mixture of Islam and animism. And so many of them had never even met a Christian before, and never heard the gospel. And so for those people, it was the gates of hell. And an interesting thing about that passage is that it says the gates of hell will not stand against it. And so in my mind, that means that the church is going and tearing down the gates. And so that's really a lot of what our ministry is about, is going down and tearing down those gates, and bringing the gospel to those people, and so that those people don't have to pass through those gates. And so that's kind of how we felt called to go to Togo. And so then, last time we were here, 2017, our family looked a little different. That was right around the time that we found out that we were pregnant with Owen, who's our fourth child, and up to this point, our final child. You never know. Just, we have friends that have that just had a baby that's and their youngest other than that is 8. So, surprises come. So, but I'm just saying. And so, what have we been doing since then? You want to go here?
Okay. So I guess since we've been here, we finished up raising our support. And then August of 2018, we moved to Albertville, France to begin our language studies. So we went when our youngest was 5 weeks old, which I would never suggest now. But so we began language studies, and we studied there until December of 2019. And it was a hard time. It was hard learning another language with young children. They went to French public schools, just were thrown right in there, and they did really well, but it was hard for them too. So we finished our language studies in December of 2019, and in February of 2020, we moved to Togo, West Africa. Now, if anybody knows what happened in 2020, we were there for about a month before COVID hit, and so that kind of was a little interesting. But so, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, but so where is Togo? So in Africa, this is Togo, where the red line is. So it's a very little country. It's about the size of West Virginia. And it's, the country itself is very diverse. The northern part where we live is very dry. The southern part is very tropical. And so that's a little bit of where Togo is.
And then a little bit about Togo. The big picture there with the guy riding a bike in the middle. That's just kind of right down the middle of the town of Togo, and there's a market area there. Depending on the day, there may be fruits and vegetables for sale right there along the line in between the trees. And that's frequently where we do our grocery shopping, is going to that area and that road. And there's a couple boutiques that sell eggs and sugar and things like that. And so that's kind of a day in an idea of just a day in our life of what getting basic needs and things like that, and tracking things down. It's an area like that. There's no Walmart, and and then the thermometer. Yeah, that was about 10 a.m. In April, right in the hottest season, I know the thermometer set out in the sun, so it's probably not exactly accurate, but still, when the thermometer says 122 degrees, it's hot. It doesn't matter if you're measuring it accurately or not. So it may not be actually 122 degrees at that point in time, but again, it's 10 a.m., so it's not even the hottest time of day. We talk about how Togo and Mongo is really, really hot. The hot season only lasts for a few months. And so much of the rest of the time of the year, it's fairly pleasant, with highs in the 90s and lows in the 70s or 80s. And so there's about a 5-month rainy season that they're in the midst of. So they actually, one of the hospital's trucks just got stuck in the mud the other day, so deep that they had to go bring the excavator out to dig it out. So. It's not, so there is a rainy season. And then the final picture there is a mosque. And if you drive through the countryside of Togo, you will see these little tiny mosques dotted all over the place. And it is a very strongly Muslim area. Now, it's not like Orthodox Islam like you would see in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East. It's more of a folk Islam, and which is kind of a cross between the animism and Islam. But still, the people are very deeply involved in that religion and deceived by the enemy. And so then, what are we doing in Togo? There's the parables, and even Paul talks about some sow, some water, and some reap. And we do a little bit of each of those. We do a little bit of sowing, a little bit of watering, a little bit of reaping. But really, a lot of what we do is digging rocks out of the field so that those fields can be sown. Many of these, as I mentioned earlier, many of these people have never met a Christian, and they've only heard from their imams, their religious leaders, that Christians are going to try and trick you. They're going to try and deceive you. That if you ever come across a Christian, don't trust them. And so there at the hospital, we've gained a reputation of being one of the few places that'll actually be honest with you. And if we can't take care of something, we'll just tell you we can't do anything for this. And culturally, most of the places around, what they'll do if they can't do anything is they'll just put you in and give you something and just string you along until you get tired of, until you figure it out on your own. Or they will, or they will treat you incorrectly just to be doing something, because there's this idea of doing something is better than nothing, and that's not necessarily true. It's certainly not true in many circumstances, and so the people starting to see wait, this hospital that's Christian actually is telling me the truth, and they're not, and they're not lying to us, they're not deceiving us, they're not stringing us along. But I've been told that I can't trust them, but they're the ones that are more trustworthy than anybody else, and so this creates this dissonance that creates a curiosity about Christianity. And we have a fairly large Fulani population, and they're one of the groups of people that we actually see many conversions to Christianity from the Fulani population there. If you know anything about, which I wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't been there, but the Fulani people are very strongly Muslim, and all throughout West Africa, and even some groups of Fulani are involved in terrorist organizations and jihadists. Burkina Faso to our north has some Fulani groups that work with Al Qaeda associates, and so it's not. This is a people group that is very their identity is very much so in Islam. And just being honest with people and taking care of people and showing them compassion starts to bring into question maybe what they've been taught isn't really true, and so that's really a lot of what the ministry at our hospital is. We do have televisions in every hospital ward that shows the Jesus film or other Bible-based films or videos and presents the gospel. And so almost every patient that is in our hospital gets some sort of gospel presentation. If there's not somebody that speaks their language, then at least through a video that is in their own native language. And we have probably 8 different languages that are spoken at our hospital every day. Now, we went to language school for French, but I joke around, but it's not really a joke. I learned to speak French so I could speak to my translators. Only maybe half of our patients actually understand French, and the rest of them are speaking these different tribal languages. So some pictures from the hospital. The one picture is just me doing an ultrasound on a patient in the ward. I'm working in the wards. I'm a surgeon, so I'm working in the operating room. That's as far as I'm concerned, that bottom picture there is the most important room in the hospital. The non-surgeons would probably beg to differ, but since I'm the surgeon and I'm presenting, that's what I'm going to say. And then the top picture with a big group of people, that is the surgeons and operating room techs and anesthetists that were present in April of this year. So so we have 2 of our long-term surgeons, a couple of short-term surgeons that were just there for 4 to 6 months, and then one of the surgeons up there was there for about 6 months or 5 months, and she just got back this month to be there for 2 years. And then we have about 5 anesthetists that are up there, and they're all Togolese trained, they do our anesthesia, and they do an outstanding job. It's kind of like a nurse anesthesia position, but it's only 3 years of training that they have there. And then our scrub techs, and then we also have 2 PACS residents, and I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But as far as our scrub techs go, about half of them are Christians and about half of them are Muslim. And so one of the places where we are able to really build relationships with these Muslims and share the gospel in our day-to-day lives is even in the OR with these guys. And so they see when we're on our best behavior, and they see when we're on our worst behavior. And so none of us are perfect. And so I have certainly had times where I've had to go back and apologize to these guys for my bad behavior. But they get to see real life, how we really trust in the Lord, and then the grace that He shows us, and as I mentioned, the PACS program. PACS stands for Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons. And this is one of the things that I'm most excited about what's going on in Togo. So we just started a PACS program. There are probably 20, 25 PACS programs across Africa. And it is a program where we take African doctors and train them to become surgeons. It's a 5-year training program. And so we have these guys, and they're Christians, but they're at our hospital where we can train them in surgery and work on discipling them. And then way that the training is performed and the credentialing is done, they have to stay in Africa. No place else in the world will accept their training, and so we're not, training these guys up just to go to Europe or to, someplace else. They get trained. They are very well trained, and then they go to their first 5 years after training. They have to go to a missions hospital. That's a part of the agreement, the training agreement, and so we are. We've started training these guys up, and so I'm really excited about this. This is that's one of the things that I would really like you guys to be praying about. Is we have Yannick and Sweni that are our PAX residents that we are training now, and so the top picture there is the surgeons and their wives with Yannick and Sweni, and then the bottom picture is two of our long-term surgeons, me and Bryce Natier, with Yannick and Sweni. Really pray for those guys. It's not easy being one. They're in a different country. One of them is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The other is from Cameroon. So they've left their families too, and then the training is in English. Well, Yannick, his mother language or his main language is French, and so he's doing this training in a different language than what he's used to, and he's learning English as he goes. And then also being the first two in our training program. So as we make mistakes and or as we are learning how to best to do it, they're having to learn through that. And so these guys have a big task ahead of them and a challenging task. And so I would ask for your prayers for them. And then I've been talking a lot.
It's okay.
Do you want to go? Okay. And then our hospital opened in 2015. That top picture in the corner is the first day that the hospital opened, looking out at the gates. And just, you can see the crowds and crowds, hundreds of people waiting to get in to be seen. And then the bottom picture with all the blue shirts, that is all the hospital employees on the 5-year anniversary of the hospital opening in 2020, which was about 3 weeks after we got there. And then the little baby with the sign that says 100,000. That is the 100,000th patient to be seen at our hospital, and that was earlier this year. So the hospital has been really busy from the start, and is just getting busier. And lots of people coming in, and lots of people getting taken care of. And so, yeah. Now you talk.
So, as he said, we have 4 children. Our oldest, Elijah, is in the red shirt up there. Our second is Avery. She's up on the termite mound. Isaiah's in front of her, and then Owen is our youngest. We pass this termite mound all the time, and they really wanted to take a picture, so we stopped one day to do that. But then the picture is our house. That's where we live. Actually, I love our house. It's beautiful on the inside. It has marble floor. It's just, but it just looks like a normal house, like what you would see here, although the outside is a little bit more brown. And then the bottom picture, so that's how we get all of our fruits and vegetables. We do have a store that's about 2 hours south. We call it the American store because there was a Togolese man who discovered that Americans like certain things and started stocking them. And it's really nice. We can just text him our order, and he sends it up in a taxi. We can sometimes sometimes we just get treats. I know one of our first things we got was root beer that we were super excited about. But we get a lot of our meat from him. But this is where we get our fruits and our vegetables and our eggs and things like that. So, yeah. So a little bit about what I do. I work with member care. And so one of the things that we do is we try to look at our team and figure out how we can best support each other. And so we have different ways that we do that. The picture under the, it looks like a lake behind me, that is where we go to the hippo pond. And I do frequently take short-term people that come out to visit or other people to go see the hippos. Sometimes we can see them. During dry season, we can see them pretty well sometimes. But during rainy season, it's really hard to see them. But it is still a nice place to go out and see. The top picture is our Christmas Eve service, and that's one of the things that we do too as a missionary family. And it's just such a neat time to be able to gather together. We do also do outreach, not member care, but the team also does outreach things as well. But it's nice sometimes to just do things to be able to encourage and lift each other up. The bottom picture was our Easter egg hunt. We call it an Easter egg hunt Mongo style because that is during hot season. And so it is kind of nice to be able to do it in the pool. For the younger kids, we just put them in the water. For the older kids, we weighted them down with rocks. So they had to go and actually dive for them. So that was kind of fun. But that's our pool. It's really nice to be able to have a pool, especially during hot season. A lot of times the missionaries will gather there during the evenings. Just to kind of cool off and to just debrief sometimes even. So that is one of the nice things that we have. So for our kids, this top picture, look, that's their school. They go to school. We have had in the past 2 American teachers. We have that this year as well, but the 2 teachers we have this year are only going to be there for a year. They're looking at maybe coming back long term, but we at least have them committed to a year. And it's basically a 2-room schoolhouse. One of the classrooms is 1st through 4th grade, and then there is a separate kindergarten class. And then the other classroom kind of fluctuates. Sometimes one is 1st through 5th, and the other is 6th through 8th, and it kind of goes back and forth for 5th graders. Eli was the only 5th grader this past year, so he was in the 1st through 5th grade class. But they have art. That was the picture that's below the schoolhouse. That was something that they had made during art. And then the other picture is them doing gym class. So they have PE as well. And so it's really neat to be able to have those experiences. I am very grateful for those teachers who are willing to do that, and the parents, the people who are doing the PE are some of the parents. So that's kind of what it looks like for the kids.
Give me the mic for the hard one. So what is rest, and is it possible in this kind of setting? So we talked about how busy the hospital was and the needs, and there was time when there was at least 1 month where I was the only surgeon, and so there was somebody there for the first couple days and somebody else there for the last couple days, but otherwise I was on call 28 days out of the 30 days of that month. Even when we had 2 or 3 surgeons, frequently we were working 100-hour weeks. And so whereas I'd never really had to think about how am I going to rest, and never had to be intentional about how am I going to rest and recharge. This was a time. These last few years have been a time where we've really had to look at that, and as a family kind of deal with that. And there's been team conflict over kind of this same issue. And so it's just something that that's something that we'd ask for your prayers, that as we go through our ministry there in Togo, that rest is a very difficult thing to find, and rest is a very difficult thing to do, but it is so important. When God created the earth, Adam and Eve's very first day was Sabbath. God, on this, they were created on the sixth day. Their very first entire 24-hour period day was a Sabbath. And so God created us to be able to work from rest and not have rest be just something we do as an afterthought, which is kind of how I had functioned in my whole life. Is there were times where I said, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I'll have enough rest when I'm dead, and I've learned that attitude will drive you to an early grave, so that has been one of our struggles, and one of the things that God is working on and teaching us, and I don't have all the answers yet for that, and so that's one thing that we would really ask for your prayers then, is just this way. Before we got to the field, I would get asked, how are you going to make sure you're not doing too much and everything? And I said, oh well, I'll be able to stop. And as Beth will, gently say, I didn't. And she had to tell me, and so I really have to rely on her a lot for that, to know when I'm overdoing it, and so that's something that we are working through, and then that's kind of, we can go on talking about whatever if you want, but I think we have about 10 minutes left. What questions do you guys have? Because we're never going to think of all the things that you really want to know about. Yes? When will we be going back? So right now, our scheduled time to return will be July of 24. So our ABWE's policy is like 80% of the time on the field, 20% of the time in the States. And we had a short period of time in the States in the middle of all this with some health issues with one of our family members. That doesn't usually count towards the that 2080. So technically we were kind of on the field from the time we went to language school until we got back for furlough, almost 5 years. And so we're taking a little bit over a year back here in the States. Typically that 2080 looks like 4 years and 1 year. For most missionaries, for medical missionaries in a austere place, we're still trying to figure out exactly what that needs to look like, because that's probably not going to be sustainable for us. But that's kind of the policy is 80-20. So yes.
What is the most common type of surgery that you perform, and then when you're off for a year, what do you do to keep your surgical skills up?
What is the most common type of surgery that I perform? And then when we're off for a year, what do I do to keep my surgical skills up? Probably most common type of surgery, I would say, is for a broken leg. So orthopedic surgery is probably 40 to 50% of what we do. And then if you ask me, how much orthopedic surgery did you do in the United States? I didn't do a single day. Not in medical school, not in residency, I didn't do a single day. So a lot of that was learned there on the field from the guys that are there. And none of us are orthopedic surgeons by training, but we do quite a bit of orthopedic surgery. And that's because motorcycles are the main mode of transportation that are used. And so, with motorcycles being the main mode of transportation, there's a lot of motorcycle crashes. So, lots of leg injuries from that. And then how do I keep up my surgical skills? That's a challenge. So I was out of surgery for 2.5 years I finished training, and then we worked 5 years in the States, and then I took off a year because I had worked for 5 years, we still weren't fully funded, and so we said, okay, fine, we've got to do full-time fundraising to get to the field. And so I took a year off to do that, and then we got the language school, and that was 1.5 years. So basically 2.5 years of not setting foot in the operating room. And I was nervous about it then, but really it came back pretty quickly. So I'm not too terribly worried about a year off. I would love to, there are, people are really familiar with like travel nursing. There are that kind of thing for surgeons, but since I haven't done anything in the States for a few years, it's been hard for me to get credentialing for that. So that's something that I'm kind of working on. I'd love to work a couple shifts a month just to kind of keep up skills and keep doing things, but I'm still working on that. There's a practice in Indiana that sends people out to our hospital frequently, and I'm working with them to see if I can kind of pull a few shifts a month with them. Beth is a nurse by training. I don't know if she actually mentioned that, but she's been out of nursing for the most part for 10 years, 11 years, and so she's actually she would now that our youngest is in school, she'd really love to be able to get involved with nursing a little bit more at the hospital, and so while we're back in the States, her 10 years out of nursing, she's taken a job and is going through an orientation just to kind of get her feet wet back into doing nursing. Yes.
What kind of education do students coming over?
Yeah, there's somebody right behind you. I saw their hand first, but go ahead. Where is our home church? Our home church is Washington Heights Baptist Church in Dayton, Ohio. Okay.
What kind of education do the students coming into the PACS program have before they get to you?
They have a medical degree, a doctorate from whatever country they're from. And we have found that varies significantly. So that is one of the challenges. One of our guys is really, really bright and does a really, really great job. And one of our guys is really, 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 really struggling, and I am not fully confident that he will be able to finish the program. But we are continuing to pray for him and work hard with him and do everything we can to help him and support him through it and see if he can, we want to see him succeed. Yes, back there.
You mentioned this is a Christian hospital. Who initially planted it, and how do you get your operating funds? Are the patients charged, or is it all by donations, or what?
So the question is this is a Christian hospital. Who planted it, and how are the operation funds obtained? So ABWE has a hospital in the southern part of the country for probably 35 years. And so the government officials in the area in Mongo came to ABWE in about 2005 and said, would you consider building a new hospital up here up north? And so we did a lot of the fundraising. So ABWE did kind of the initial planning and fundraising and all of that, and construction started in 2010. Was it 2010 or 2009? Doesn't matter. It was right around then. And so the hospital opened in 2015. So it was our mission organization that raised all the funds through donations to build the hospital, and then also provided the. We hired local people for a lot of the labor, and sourced as much of the supplies as possible locally. Many of the things were shipped in on containers, and then the hospital was built. It took about 5 years from the start of construction until the hospital could be opened, and so from about 2015 or 2010 to 2015. And then how is surgery funded? So all the patients are, so typically in Togo, as Beth mentioned earlier, you have to pay up front. And that's a very common thing in all of Africa, much of Africa, I should say, where you pay up front before you can get your surgery or anything. And that's just accepted as how things are. Our hospital, if it's an elective surgery, then yes, they have to pay up front. If it's an emergency surgery, we don't make people wait and so we will bill them afterwards. And if people can't afford it, we have a Hope Patient Care Fund, and we have a number of very wise Togolese believers that work in our accounting office, and they are able to talk with people and make arrangements. So if somebody truly is poor, they will be able to help them from the Hope Patient Care Fund. If somebody doesn't have cash, but they have a huge herd, we will accept cows and sheep in payment. The hospital has a fairly sizable flock and herd of sheep, goats, I don't know what they are, but sorry, and cows, and that they will sell at the time of year when the prices are high, and so we'll accept, we'll work with people, but if it's an emergency, somebody comes in with a typhoid perforation or he needs an emergency C-section, we're not waiting around for money. We're going to take care of them. That money that is charged, most of that actually goes towards paying the salary of the employees. So most of that money that the hospital brings in is just going right back out into the community through salaries. And there are a lot of donations. Medical equipment is donated, and so it's a combination of what we charge and donations. And each of the missionaries, part of what we have to raise every month, it goes into helping the hospital keep running. So, yes.
What is the capacity of the hospital, and how much of a nursing staff is there?
Capacity of the hospital is probably between 50 and 60 beds. They're actually building an addition to the maternity area right now, or at least they were when we left. I don't know if that's finished or not. So adding a few more beds there as far as labor and delivery beds. And then and nursing staffing. So the nurses are mostly Togolese and trained through the nursing school that we have, and so that's where most of the nursing staff is. We have some missionaries that are nurses, some short-term nurses that come in to help out. We have a nursing school that is about 2/3 of the way through their classes now, so that there will be another 12 to 15 nurses that'll get put into the mix. There's usually about 7 or 8 nurses working in the hospital at any given shift. There's usually about 7 or 8 nurses. On a bad day when there's a lot of vacations, it may be as few as 5. So I think we have reached the end of our time, and we would love to answer more questions and talk to you. We will be hanging out at our table, and so you can come and find us and talk to us after the service.
No, I asked them to stop just a little bit early so that if they need to use the restroom or get ready, if you want, you can be out at your table between now and the service, and then they'll be out again after the service. And what I'm going to do in the middle of the service, just before I preach this morning, I will introduce them, have them stand, so that the people who weren't at Sunday school this morning will get to know them. So we're going to let you take a break here before the service starts. Thank you.